Hello, you're listening to Astrology Hotline. I'm Kyle Pierce, and this is the forecast for December 12th through December 18th, 2022. And we start off Monday with the sun ingressing into the third decan of Sagittarius. As it kind of slides into that third decan, also it applies to a sextile with Saturn and Aquarius. So with the sun in the third decan of Sag, we get a sense of what the finish line looks like. We set our targets in the first decan, fueled by that sort of initial spurt of enthusiasm. In the second decan, we had our plans tested against adversity. Certainly during the full moon, I imagine a lot of us were tested, to say the least. I do hope that everybody made it through the full moon in Gemini, conjunct Mars in one piece. A lot of us may still be coming down a bit off of the conflicts or disruptions that came up around that time. And now as we're in this third decan, we are getting a sense of what the finish line looks like and sort of summoning the will to push ourselves across that finish line. There can be a bit of a weariness here, be feeling a bit of overwhelm, sense that there's still a lot that needs to be done to get where we're trying to go. And it may be that we need to clear some things off our plate in order to get there. Thinking a little bit about how if you're riding in say, a hot air balloon, you're maybe reaching the end of your destination and you're trying to land, trying to get back down to ground, back to Capricorn, we'll say. And that sort of requires this maybe controlled reduction of heat, sort of gradually. Maybe you even need to cut some weight. Never been in a hot air balloon. I'm actually terrified personally, but I imagine at least in some cases you may have to do that. I know they have the sandbags on there. So this could look a little like that, actually. It's reminding me of a road trip that some friends and I went on when I was much younger. And, we didn't really plan all that well. We just knew that we wanted to drive around the country and hit a certain number of cities and do it all in about 2 or 3 weeks. And we got to Las Vegas, coming from Michigan, going down to Florida to pick up a friend, and then, circling through the southern United States and Texas to Las Vegas. We still had California to do, but it was clear that we were running out of money. So we quickly had to become very clear about what was a priority. We definitely had to make some cuts. And by the time we got to Utah, or rather California, we had to sort of restructure our plan. We contacted a friend in Colorado. We were going to stop there to sort of eat and refuel, take a nap, because at that point we were just driving straight home and sort of pooling every last resource we had towards that end. So on the one hand, there's a level of satisfaction at having, accomplished most of what we wanted to accomplish with the trip. But I recall that the experience was not pleasant those last few days. But it did end up making a good story, which I'm not going to get into right now because we need to stay on track. But it is kind of the theme here. Might need to get serious about what needs to be done. We might be having to dig a little bit to find our resolve. And with Mars, still retrograde and sending sort of arrhythmic waves of energy, we needing to suppress impulses that might compromise the fulfillment of the goals or obligations that we still need to achieve. And this Sun-Saturn sextile can be, I think, helpful, while perhaps not energizing, but sort of gets us comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. Interestingly, as the sextile is occurring, Mercury, which is in Capricorn, and sort of hurtling forward at sort of maximum Mercury speed, it's a solid 1.5 degrees. It's moving fast. And by the end of the day, it'll already be at about 9 degrees of Capricorn. where it's actually going to hit a sort of shadow aspect with the sun in Sagittarius called Antisha. They will be equal distant from that cusp of Capricorn. So they're sort of mirroring each other. Many astrologers treat this as sort of a secret conjunction, but rather different from a conjunction because it's occurring in two signs that otherwise don't, obviously at least, have a lot in common. Now, this is an interesting point for this little Antisha aspect to be happening because it's right around where Mercury is entering its shadow. Because later on this month, Mercury is going to go retrograde, where it will spend about 3 weeks moving backwards, and it will again station direct at around 8 degrees Capricorn. So it may be worth noting that right now, some of the track that you're maybe laying down may have to be retread or revisited in some way in the future. And to a large degree, that maybe just has to be part of the plan. There's maybe only so much of what goes haywire that we can prevent through planning. To some degree, we have to build plans around those unexpected curveballs, maybe, which, with this Mercury ruling that Mars and Gemini, we are likely to still have some in store for us. So, this can look like a lot of different things, obviously, for a lot of people, but this could look like getting maybe just a little bit of insight on how to establish maybe a firmer, more stable structure or like workflow that can facilitate that sort of final push towards the end zone. Can also maybe give us a little bit of insight on, maybe what's driving forces of chaos that are unleashed in the Gemini part of your life that can maybe serve as informing like a more strategic approach to handling maybe a conflict that is ongoing in your life, either between another person or internally. I think the overall theme this week is moving forward with a bit of restraint and maybe a narrowed field of focus. There's a lot of mutable energy still at play right now that can potentially lead to some dispersal of energy and maybe some frayed edges on things. And with Mercury entering its shadow, you don't want to have too many threads or sort of loose ends at play right now, because it's likely that, those edges are likely to get split. So for the sake of momentum, we'll say, for maybe conserving our gas, maybe even literally, given the recent Keystone pipeline spill, well, we might want to make sure that our channels of energy are as sort of clean and direct as possible. Maybe use this moment of sort of sober clarity that we're getting here on Monday to lay down some plans that we can follow through on. And the moon's going to make a trine with the sun. The moon in Leo, it's to be the waning trine. I generally like to look at as a favorable time to sort of synergize the sort of wind down in operations that we experience coming off of any full moon. It's really, there's a strong emphasis on finishing, or in many ways, in some case, literally, sort of doing cleanup operations post culmination. And this one's especially nice given the reception between the moon and Leo, ruled by the sun. As we get further into the week, things start to look a little less clear, particularly as we get to a square between the sun and Neptune, which will occur on Tuesday. It'll go exact around evening time, kind of carrying over into Wednesday. So there's sort of clarity followed by not so clarity. So this may look needing to push through some fog or confusion by just sort of sticking to the plan that was laid out earlier in the week. The Neptune square, it can be useful, especially when still pretty close to and ruled by Jupiter, still in Pisces. Sometimes when we're trying to push ourselves across the finish line, we need to build a little bit more of a dramatic narrative to keep us chugging along. It can be useful for making something that is maybe rather arduous and not particularly meaningful or fun, to sort of sex it up a little bit, give it a little bit of a sense of drama, or grandiosity, which may be especially useful because this week in general, while rather rich in maybe forward-thinking pragmatism, it's not exactly flush with tons of energy. Moon will be opposing Saturn, as it's also making that waning trine with the sun. So this is very much a cooling down, and perhaps a a need to put our personal needs aside for the sake of a greater good or higher principle, or just to maybe get through the next couple weeks. Imagine as we get towards the holidays, a lot of us are trying to maybe deliver on a certain set of expectations. Maybe you have a kid that really wants some $400 set of Legos. Those sets are really expensive. Or, a new guitar. And a lot of us have budgets that are under extra strain as of late. So, this may mean tightening the belt a little bit, be cutting back on certain personal pleasures or comforts, or putting in some extra hours at work. Because if you are trying to buy a $400 Lego set, if you only have $350, there's still no Lego set. You either can afford it or you can't. There's no second place for Lego sets. I suppose you could actually get another Lego set, but I think you get the idea. The general energy this week is a bit of laboring and perhaps a bit of sacrificing in order to achieve the spirit of what it is that we're going for, even if we have to shave off bits of its original form. Getting into Wednesday, we have the moon ingressing into Virgo, where it will make a generally more pleasant trine with Venus, just as the sun is making that exact square with Neptune. So again, this is very much staying the course through the fog, really sticking with the plan that I think is going to really yield best results for most of us, especially as we get into Thursday, where we will have the moon applying to a trine with Mercury here at about 11 degrees of Virgo, rather 12 degrees of Virgo, and 12 degrees of Capricorn, quickly followed by the moon making a square, receiving a square from Mars. Now, this is actually we would call a translation of light. You see, the moon will be separating from Mercury, and very shortly after applying the square with Mars, sort of reflecting the ray it received from Mercury back over to Mars, and Mercury being in charge of Mars to some degree, or at the very least tied. That's a message that that Mars may want to hear, which maybe in a more specific context could result in Mars maybe not taking all of the moon's lunch money. Maybe just given a wedgie as opposed to a swirly. But in a more general sense, for a lot of us, it's going to probably feel a little more anxious, kind of maybe a frazzled energy, where maybe a little more disruption to our rhythm and plans than we would like. I'd say certainly not aided by the moon shortly after that square with Mars applying to a trine with Taurus, Uranus and Taurus. While it is a trine, the moon in Uranus, it doesn't, it's not conducive to steadiness, which I think needs to be the goal for a lot of us this week. You're chugging along on that last leg of your road trip, and maybe you get a flat tire, or maybe you get one of your headlights out, which is maybe the last thing you need when you're eating ramen noodles dry out of the package, dipped in peanut butter. But a moment like that is a moment where you need to just address what needs to be addressed, maybe not let panic get the better of you, or, split off your energy. There could be a sense of urgency. It could be a bit overblown, perhaps. And this would also be maybe a moment where we have to make sure we're not pushing too hard. We may need to get uncomfortable and push a little further out of our comfort zone than we'd like, but we don't want to burn ourselves out either. But, if you do overdo it a wee bit on Thursday, Friday is a rather good day to do a bit of it's like a ritualized decompression, perhaps. Obviously, you'll want to find your moment. As the moon applies to this opposition with Neptune, just as we're hitting that final fourth quarter square between the moon and the sun, we could explore some processes of spiritual it's going to be just sort of sinking into a hot Epsom salt bath, or booking yourself an hour in like a float pod. I think what those are called. If we're trying to strip our vehicle for parts, or for rid ourselves of excess weight, it may just be a matter of temporarily uncoiling ourselves from our day-to-day tasks and just sort of letting stuff fall off, relax into the undifferentiated space between your body and the water. Whatever your preferred method of uncoiling or de-stressing, Friday's your day. We'll be getting the moon in Libra on Friday afternoon on the East Coast, where things take on a little bit more of a even tone. The moon will apply to a square with Venus Saturday morning, which, as far as squares go, is certainly substantially more pleasant than one between Mars. Certainly with Venus receiving the moon by the square, this could look a little bit more like mandatory cuddling, or maybe spending the day at home in a onesie, maybe doing some light house cleaning, rearranging of your furniture. You do get a slightly mixed vibe of getting cozy and getting some shit done. So you get a moon, we'll make a trine with Mars right after that square with Venus, and another square with Mercury later in the afternoon. It's going to be a bit of finally getting that time to unwind and relax. And it's like the second you get comfortable and sort of find your energy to do some of that sort of low input household shit. And Sunday, things get a little more quiet. The moon only completes one aspect all day. That is a trine with Saturn, which may necessitate, maybe balancing your checkbook, ordering some gifts for those distant cousins you almost forgot about, or that uncle you don't like so much, and, maybe just nap. And with that, we'll wrap it up for this week. I know this may not sound like the most fun week ever, and that's because it isn't really. But I can tell you that it is a lot less stressful than last week. And overall, the next several weeks look a lot less challenging overall. It's not a bit more subdued, but we do get some nice things as well. The worst of 2020 has passed, rather, of 2022 has passed. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. As always, you can book a reading with me on my website, KylePierceAstrology.com. If you like the podcast, leave a review, share it with a friend, post about us on your social medias, and have a safe and fruitful week. And I'll see you next time. If you have a question that you would like to hear answered on Astrology Hotline, please shoot us an email at astrologyhotlinepod@gmail.com.